everybody, to the SaaS Stories podcast. Today, I'm joined by Jay Tokosch, CEO, entrepreneur of a wonderful company by the name of NoteAffect, which is an award-winning content workflow management platform, mainly for the education and event space. And Jay, I know this is your seventh company. I'm really keen to hear about your journey in the tech space. If you could please enlighten me and the listeners today, what is it about the tech space that drew you here? What has your journey been like? And what is your mission today?
Yeah, so the tech space, I think tech is something that because it's something that is always evolving, there's always something new. It's never do it once and it's settled that attracts me to it because it's constantly, moving and gaining space and ever changing. So I like that about it. And I've always been, all of my other companies have always been in the tech space in some form or fashion, whether that be hardware or software. But yeah, I think that's the key for me. And what motivates me to be a part of it. Those are where my ideas come from too.
Amazing. I think you're right. That's what's always drawn me about the tech space as well. I've always craved change. I think, being moved around as a child a lot to 4 different countries, 6 different schools, it definitely planted a seed that kind of always made me look for the next thing. Um, what would you describe as your mission today with NoteAffect?
Our mission today is to really, we have sort of two missions. One on the education space is to make teachers and students better. And then on the event space, we want to increase the value of your content and create fear of missing out of coming to your event. So those are the two, it's the same base platform for both products. The flow is a little bit different. They say that entrepreneurs build solutions around uh, things that they're trying to find for themselves, right? They're to solve problems that they're having or things of that nature. And this is definitely the case on my side. Not so much in the education space because that's been a long time ago, but the way that it came down was me literally going to sessions at conferences or trade shows and watching the content up on the screen and all of my notes becoming separate from that and me getting back to my office and trying to share that information or talk about that, follow-up initiatives, any of those types of things with it all being separate. And at the same time, my youngest son was home from school and college, and he had these presentations, PowerPoint presentations, and other documents all laid out on our kitchen table, and his notes were all separate. And he was trying to go through all that and study for a test. And I looked at it and I realized that he had the same problem I had. It was just different content and in different places, but we were both experiencing this same thing. And as I dove into it, and I started to research it more, they talked about that being called passive learning, and yet that's the least effective way to learn. But the most effective way to learn was interactive and engaging learning. And so I set off on my journey to build a product that did that.
That's amazing. I could definitely relate to that with events, going there, being all excited, of course, writing down my notes, coming home. The next day I look at my notes, I go, what have I written here? What does this mean? I don't understand any of it.
Exactly. Well, on top of that, then you have my handwriting, which I can't even read sometimes myself. So that's definitely not a good thing if you factor all that into it. And that was the case for NoteAffect. Yeah, that was the way that it worked.
Yeah, yeah. I love hearing these stories where there's always a gap in the market and it's always a personal problem, and you just kind of see the solutions and you go and invent this product, which is amazing. Now this is your seventh business, so I'd love to ask you maybe just the core principles or initiatives you've taken to turn it into, from a startup idea to a successful business. What are the core principles of that?
Yeah, so I have a process that I began years ago that has seemed to been a good process for me. And everybody, I think, should have their own process that works for them. But I tend to be this idea person, right? I tend to come up with the ideas, like I did for NoteAffect, and I write that all down. I write as much of it out as I possibly can, and that could be at 3 o'clock in the morning. That could be, uh, at any particular time when these ideas come to me. And I constantly keep a running list of those ideas. So, I have a list of those ideas, even still to this day. And then what I do is from time to time, I go back over that list of ideas that are there. And I start to take them apart and look and see, do they, is it something that I've kind of fully figured out? Do I need to add more to it? What's going on with that? Then the next step in my process is after I go through that is I then start to do research. The internet has been great. AI has been even more fantastic, to be able to take that idea and start researching it and see who else is doing what I'm doing or has this in mind. Is there anything else like this out there? Or are they successful? Have they been successful? Whatever. And I go through that process to determine if it gets to that next stage. For me, the process in the second stage. And if it does and it lives on beyond that, then the next thing from there for me is, can I build a business model around it? I want to know, can I make money from this? Or what am I going to do before I get to the next stage after that? Because if I can't figure out what I think the business model should be, and don't get me wrong, I'll tell you a story about where I started with one business model and changed. If I can't figure that out, then I don't want to go to the next step. Right. And quick story on that is, so my previous company was a company called Core Apps. And we were the first ones to do mobile applications in the event space. This was 2009. And we had the idea that we would build this mobile app and not charge the event organizers anything for doing that. We would charge the attendees going to the event through the app stores, $1.99. And we thought, what a better way to make money than just $1.99, and that'll be a great way to do it and sell sponsorships for the to the exhibitors and so forth for on the app, and that's the way that we would make their money. And we started down that road with that, and we actually made some money that way. But what we didn't realize is that currently at that time, the information that a lot of the information was being inside of the app, even though the app was very interactive, like the list of exhibitors, the list of the sessions that were going on, came free to them in paper maps or booklets that they could take with them for free. And so they started complaining to the event organizers that they shouldn't have to pay $1.99, which I thought was cheap enough, to get this information, that it should come to them for free. Fortunately for us, the event organizers saw the value in our product and that it was green and it was saving them tons of money on all that printing that never made it back to the office, where the event was living on, and they saw all of that. So they saw a lot of value behind it. So they approached us, a few of them, and they said, listen, we're willing to pay for this now. We're willing to pay what we think is a fair price. And we figured out what that was. And we did it that way. So we ended up changing our model from that standpoint. And we also went back to them and said, listen, we're not getting anywhere with your exhibitors. And they said, that's because 1 million people are trying to hit these exhibitors up for different things. We said, okay, let's work with you, who they know, to sell the sponsorships inside the mobile app. And so that's what we ended up doing. And that's how our revenue changed, our revenue model changed into that, from that standpoint. But then going back to the process that I was talking about, so then the next step in the process is once I have that down and I figure that out, it's starting to put together, sort of a prototype of the whole idea. And what I found is that you can pull in your friends to kind of talk about that, or people in the industry that you're going after, and talk about that and put that forth in front of them. But what you really need to do is people who you don't know and get their honest opinions. There's a book out called The Mom Test. I don't know if you've ever heard of it before, but essentially what they say in that book, and I thought it was really good, was your mom loves you. She's going to tell you whether it's good or bad either way. And try and be supportive and all of that kind of stuff. And that's not really what you need at that particular point. You need someone to be
No.
brutally honest with you, tell you that, it's not a great idea, or not get it, or whatever else. And what I found was, if I use that process when I'm doing that, what I end up getting out of it at the end of the day is the person and the people that I work with and talk to that about that. It helps me start to formalize how the flow is going to work, right? How the interface has got to look, and what the ultimate goal is, because they're actually going to tell you what it is, right? And then you're going to actually, at the end of the day, use that for marketing and selling back to them, because they're going to tell you, if you have the idea, they're going to tell you, yes, these are my problems. Yes, that will solve that, or it won't solve that, or whatever. They're going to help you formulate that in doing it. And sometimes you don't get past that part of the process. Sometimes it's can't figure it out. And you know what? You put that on the back shelf and you keep moving on. And sometimes you don't get past the process of where the revenue stream, how that works, and how you're going to get past that. And so that's kind of like my 4 or 5 step process, the way that I do it. And I feel good about it, and then kind of go from there.
Yeah, it sounds like a very smart process. Actually, I've met so many startup founders where they're just so set on the idea and how good it is in their minds that they can't move past the fact that this might not sell to anyone, or other people might not see it the way that they do. And I think a lot of the startups as well, they have this philosophy of like, we'll build it and they'll come, it'll happen. Because I think to be fair to them, a lot of them are very future focused, but we just don't know if the target audience that they're building this for is there yet. They might be moving a lot quicker in their minds than a lot of what the target audience is.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And here's the thing, when you're doing that, another part of that process is that you're trying to figure out who else you need to bring in to be a part of that process with you, right? You at a startup, you're going to wear many hats at the beginning. You're going to be the marketing
That's
person.
right.
You're going to be
Yeah.
the operations person. You're going to do the
Accountant.
payroll. Yeah, exactly. All those things. And so I think it's funny, but you're going to also probably need some other people that can help you with that, in that process, and figuring out who those people are, what their specialty is that isn't your specialty, because you can't, even though you wear a lot of those hats, you know, it's like they say, you can't be good at everything. So you got to find other people that you can't be good at this. You need to bring those in and make them a part of it, whether you offer them equity or whatever you decide to do. From that standpoint, I think it's important to recognize that you're going to need to do that.
I agree. I think some of the first hires that you make are crucial to the scaling the business. But I think it's also Warren Buffett that said, one of the most critical and important things you can do in business is just find a good partnership, because you're right, you can't do everything yourself. You mentioned AI previously, and I just kind of started thinking about, what's new in the world at the moment, what's kind of trending in the world of tech. What do you think marketers and also founders should focus on today when it comes to these new trends that are emerging?
Yeah, AI is an interesting one because it's exploding everywhere, both in the two industries that we're focused on right now, education and events. And then later on, we'll go down the corporate road as well, which we have. I think the key factor for AI at this particular point for any startup is to figure out your data and create the data lake or what silo or whatever you want to call it. People are calling it different things. I think that part of it is going to be your success because there's a lot of AI engines out there. But one thing that there isn't is your collection of the data that you're going to feed into that, right? Whether it's closed or it's open, or it's closed and sometimes it's open, right? With what you're doing. But AI, when you're thinking of how you going to use AI, you've got to think about how you're going to collect that data and how you're going to push that through. I think one of the things that's holding AI back right now, this is just my opinion, is that AI, it's kind of the wild wild west. You've got a prompt and you can
Yeah.
type anything you want into it. And the sad part of that is that probably 75 to 80% of the people just don't even know what to type into that. So if you're building something, I think need to specialize in that for them and create a UI that fits that
Mm.
and have that be the back end of it.
Yeah.
That to me is how you're going to be successful with AI. It's like, it reminds me, and this probably dates me, but the old DOS prompt, where it just
Yeah.
sat there flashed and you type something in. Well, this is a little bit more advanced than that, obviously, but the fact is that that prompt and what you're typing in and the things that you're doing, and then you go to the next level and next level and next level, someone can kind of build that around the industry that you're looking on working on with AI. I think that's the
Mm.
key for you to be successful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to learn how to use AI properly, I think. And the funny thing I've heard recently was that apparently ChatGPT is getting stupider just because of all the prompts that we've been putting into it, and the silly questions that we're asking it.
Yeah, and exactly. I've heard the same thing, and that goes back to the data part that I was talking about, right? So if you close the network with that, and you just use your data to feed that in, and you're only doing that, and you're building your models around that, I think you're going to be much more successful. Um, but but yeah, ChatGPT and a bunch of the others, because there's so much going on with that, so much deep fake and a bunch of other things. It's having trouble.
Hmm. Um, the B2B consumer, I think you must have had some experience in the event world with the B2B consumer. And you've been through COVID as well, I think, when events got completely shut down. And now, they're back again with a passion, I think, but something I've been researching on my end, and I'm actually writing a book on the topic, is how the B2B consumer has changed. And literally from like 2019 to now, not even 5 years later, um, as a result of the pandemic. And I think, the digital transformation that happened as a result, but also AI, I've definitely seen some changes in the way people buy now. Have you seen the same thing? And if so, what have been your observations?
Yeah, absolutely. The pandemic has set a whole new world, not only from businesses just and their remote workforces that have been kind of crazy to and them trying to manage that, but to the event space itself. Events used to compete prior to the pandemic, used to compete with other events that were like theirs or some offshoot or something like that, and that's what they competed with. And today, because of the pandemic, the people who were running trade shows with exhibitors, the exhibitors went out and found new ways to be able to connect with the attendees that were there, or make business, right? That's the only way they could survive. And content was getting generated outside of those events during the pandemic, and that continues on too. And it's the same for the exhibitors. That's continued on, and then communities started growing outside of those events, right? So events, their competition got really, really big. So from a B2B standpoint, the business people had to keep going on and moving on in order for them to continue to be successful, while the event industry shut down during the pandemic, or had very little with the virtual stuff, and that wasn't very successful for them. So now they're coming back, and events are coming back, and they're facing a much wider range of, you know, business, getting people to come back to their events. They're not fearing missing the event anymore, right? If they
Right.
miss it, I can still get this content someplace else. I can still meet with these exhibitors. I can still
Hmm.
do this. I can still do those types of things. So from a B2B standpoint, they're having a tough time with that. And if they continue to keep going down that road, I think it's going to be a problem for them, because it's just not it's just not sustainable. They've got to go back and create, and that's been really the focus of my product. So it's kind of funny that you're bringing that up, but it's been the focus of my product on the event side, called Event Ace, is recreating the fear of missing out for your event by creating an interactive learning experience that can live on beyond the event and do something different than what they can get experience wise outside of your event. We need to create an experience that only they can get when they come to your event. B2B, it's just like anything else, man. It will continue to survive and evolve for those who strive to be successful.
Hmm. That's a really good point you made about the content with the events and people feeling like I can get this content from anywhere. I can miss out. I mean, it's like with a lot of webinars that get hosted as well. People are always expecting to receive the recording afterwards, which is why attendance rate for webinars has just plummeted. Um, but yeah, just coming back to B2B, I think another change I'm seeing is that the millennials they now make 70% of the decision-making workforce. And they, of course, are very much used to, the digital transformation. They're quite savvy. They know how to get content. They know how to do their own research. They kind of prefer a self-serve option when it comes to buying as well, which could be challenging for a lot of B2B companies because, I don't think they caught up in time as the consumers have. Are there any other challenges that you're finding in the world of B2B at the moment?
Yeah, I think what you're talking about with the self-serve model is definitely something that I see. They want to be able to retrieve it immediately. It's the old adage of what do they say? I want it and I want it right now. That's going on. So companies are finding ways to deliver that, and they're using, in my opinion, they're using education to deliver that in a lot of ways, right? They're saying we can deliver this educational part to this, and I'm not talking about actual hard products, but I'm talking about other types of things, whether that be software based or just regular reading content that's going on. So, yeah, I mean, the millennials are doing it one way. The older generation is utilizing that and doing it a different way. Here's a story for that came to my mind. So today, when you go to an event with part of our product, and I don't mean to go down this road, but um, when that content's being presented to the users in real time and they can make their notes notes and annotate and highlight on top of it, which is what we do. The younger generation is interacting with that content directly, real time, right then and there. The older generation has gotten smart. They've realized that because they've got it on their device, it's being recorded and it'll show up in their web portal later. And they'll go back to it when they get back to their office or their home and interact with it then when they're comfortable and they can keep up with it and do that. Same result at the end of the day, right? From an analytics standpoint and everything else that we do, but that just describes the difference between the two generations that you see, going to that. And B2B at this particular point needs to accommodate both.
For sure. Interesting, the differences. I guess the older generations want to be more in the moment, and then they kind of prioritize it for later. Whereas the younger ones, hook to their devices, I suppose. So
they're used to it. Absolutely. They grew up with this device, right? They grew up with the
yeah.
phone, and everything is the phone, and they're ordering food and they're ordering, products and services right directly from that. And that's a staple for them.
Yeah. And you're right. I think they've become accustomed to getting it right now. I mean, Prime, next day delivery, right? So
hours and
yeah.
Prime shows up, I cracked
Oh,
my phone
wow.
case the other day and I was and I thought, well, I can make it through with this, and it was kind of sharp and it was cutting my ear when I put it up, and I was like, I need a new phone case, and I literally ordered it, and 2 hours later it was at my door.
Amazing. The world that we live in today.
I
Incredible.
know, but I
And
can't say that I'm disappointed in that. It was great. I can't say that I'm disappointed in that.
yeah. Coming back to teams, we talked about this earlier about, obviously startup founders can't they do wear all the hats. They can't do that forever. They do need to build teams and, form partnerships at some point if they want to scale and grow, and have some resemblance of a work-life balance. What qualities would you prioritize when building a tech team for your new startup?
Yeah. Well, first, I've been fortunate to have a few people who have been part of my team and followed me along in the last couple of ventures that I've done, which has been great. We know each other. We know how we work together, and that's worked out really well. I will say that in today's world, and especially with the way that SaaS is built, right, there's a lot of ways to inexpensively outsource things that are not costly for you to help you, right? You're talking about, bookkeeping, accounting type stuff. We're talking about potential sales leads for you from that standpoint. We're talking about building a marketing plan for you, and heck, even AI can do the marketing plan stuff and do a bunch of different things for you from that standpoint too.
Yeah, my favorite
So
employee, AI.
there you go. So there's a lot of opportunity from a startup standpoint that I can tell you that just 3 years ago didn't exist, and you were doing that, or you were finding it was a very much more expensive. It was a much more expensive way to do that, right? So today, for example, I use a company that very inexpensively for me to generate my educational videos, my training videos, my marketing videos. And I paid one flat fee for doing that. I write the scripts, I load it in, it works out great for me. It's fantastic. But prior to that, I had a guy who was a videographer, out of Hollywood, who did this stuff for me part-time. And even though he was very good for me, did a fantastic job, was very inexpensive compared to what someone of his caliber should cost me. It took much more time, cost me much more money, but that's all I had years ago. Today, I have this, and there's plenty of these companies out there that do this,
Yeah.
that I can do that, and I can spend $150 a year or something like that, which is very inexpensive for me to help me get the job done now, right?
Mm.
So there's options like that today, which I think are a big help to startups and entrepreneurs, and hell, even if you've gotten a bunch of money, investment money,
Yeah.
this is the way to go.
Would your first hire then in a business be around someone who can produce content for you?
No, first hire is always going to be sales.
Sales. Yeah.
Sales drives everything. That's
Yeah.
my opinion. And you want to make sure that the very first hire that you make is a good hire. You can screw up your second and your third hire, or your second or your third hire. But your first one has to be a producer. And you might
Mm.
pay a little bit more for that person, but they've got to be a producer. You can take a chance on somebody else later on, but they've got to be a producer. I've always believed that you overload the infrastructure to the point of where it's breaking before where it's starting to break. Not that you're losing customers on a regular basis, but where it's starting to break a little bit before you go out and you hire that operations person to fill it in to build it back up, right? It's not a build it and they will come situation ever. Never, 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 right? It's I'm going to go out and I'm going to sell. I'm going to overload the infrastructure. When they start raising their hand and they can't take it anymore, I'm going to give them their support and add other people to that. And that's just my opinion. After the salesperson, and you do that, if you're not doing the marketing and that's not your forte, then you go get a marketing person. And again, you can find a chief marketing officer, that through the internet, obviously you can use AI, but if you're not comfortable with that, you can find a for hire, chief marketing officer that'll do that. Now you're going to have to make sure that they understand your business because some of them specialize in certain things, but that's the way to do it.
Jay, thank you. I have a closing question on the podcast that I'd love to ask, and it kind of ends on a positive note as well.
Okay.
What are you looking forward to in the future?
What am I looking forward to in the future? From a tech standpoint, um, I think the big thing for me has always been, if I'm going to just relate it down to my company instead of me personally. I'm going to relate it down to that. But I'm looking forward to going back, building that team that enjoys coming to work every day and loves to be a part of what we're doing together. I like to build the teams so that they all feel like they're a part of the organization, and everybody contributes. So I'm looking forward to that, which is a short-term thing as opposed to a long-term thing. I don't think long-term when I start these entrepreneurial ventures. I think more short-term. I think of where am I next year? Where am I the year after that? I know people like
Hmm.
to build it out to 5 years. My fifth
Too
year is
long.
always a little fuzzy. Yeah, my fifth year is always a little fuzzy. My first 3 years are pretty detailed, but after that, it gets a little bit fuzzy. So to me, it's building that team, having that camaraderie, and enjoying working with the people that I get to work with, and the customers too.
What an amazing goal to have. All about the people at the end of the day. Thank you
Yeah.
so much for being on the show, Jay. Really appreciate it.
Thank you, Joanna. It was a pleasure being here, and I appreciate you inviting me to be on the show.